This week, in the spirit of Halloween season, we're covering our top 5 pre-code horror comic artists. We've got over 20 books to talk about with all the gnarliest covers you could find on our site. Hopefully YouTube doesn't flag us for these, but in the meantime, if you haven't seen Tomb of Terror 15, we're bursting at the seams to show you. Welcome back to another week in speculation. Before we get started, I want to encourage you to subscribe and turn on those notifications so you don't miss out when we drop a new video. This episode contains content from our blog, so if you want to read the full story, check out the link below. But let's get started. It's October, and that means we're turning our attention to horror comics. Let's take a look at top cover artists of pre-code horror and the impact they've had on comic collecting. First off, for those new to the hobby, what do we mean by pre-code? In 1954, a Senate subcommittee on juvenile delinquency began looking into comics sold to children, specifically crime and horror. William Gaines of EC Comics said that his comics were all in good taste, but the subcommittee pointed out a cover with a dismembered head. Following these hearings, Harvey Comics then began concentrating on titles for young children, including Little Dot and Richie Rich. William Gaines' EC Comics would move away from horror and shift focus into humor and satire with Mad Magazine. The Comics Code Authority was created to make comics safe for young readers. It was a self-regulating program by comic book publishers to govern content in comic books. The stamp for the CCA appears on the cover of comic issues that have been approved by the authority. This stamp would be abandoned by Marvel in 2001. DC, Bongo, and Archie kept using the CCA stamp until 2010, when Bongo broke with the code in 2010, making the code completely defunct. The general rules that comics had to follow are easy to guess. No drugs, no cursing, no adult content. The word terror and weird were even banned from comic titles. Additionally, cops had to always be right and correct, while villains always had to lose. Some comics were able to get around the code by classifying themselves as magazines in an attempt to avoid censorship. Even some words we wanted to use here were censored by our editor. Now that we're caught up, let's chat pre-code horror. Lee Elias's name shows up across a large number of well-known pre-code horror comics. Elias had a long and illustrious career. However, it was his work for Harvey and their pre-code horror slate of books for which he is most remembered. Easily one of the most famous and goriest pre-code horror covers ever published belongs to Elias. Black Cat Comics number 50 from 1954. The melting face and hands on the cover are so horrific, they're almost beyond description. There are 112 graded copies, including one 9.8 that is never sold. The most recent sale was a 3.0 from the September 17th Heritage Auction for $9,000, down slightly from a November 2022 fixed price eBay sale for $9,500. The top price was for one of 3 9.6 graded copies, $72,000, in a November 2021 Heritage Auction. Before we move on to the Tomb of Terror number 15, we want to let you know that we just launched a preview for our new Magic the Gathering price guide. While we continue to gather data and improve the product, unlimited access to the price guide is completely free. Check it out on the site now. Let's get back to the video. Then there's Tomb of Terror number 15, beloved by pre-code horror fans for its bursting eyeball, complete with hilarious caption, "Never has a story burst." This cover is often showed as an explanation of why the comics code ever existed. With only 135 graded copies and only 2 at the top grade of 9.6, it's rare to see more than a few go up for a sale in any given year. The most recent sale was a 5.0 going for $6,600 in the July 14th Heritage Auction. The highest price paid was $45,600 for one of those 2 in the 9.6 grade in the same November 2021 Heritage Auction that saw the top sale for Black Cat number 50. Elias was a regular cover artist on Harvey's Chamber of Chills magazine, in particular Chamber of Chills magazine number 19 and Chamber of Chills magazine number 23. Punk music fans might recognize Chamber of Chills number 19 as the art for the Misfits' Die Die My Darling. There are 130 graded copies of Chamber of Chills magazine number 19, with one copy in the highest 9.6 grade. The most recent sale was a 3.0 selling for $12,000 in the September 17th Heritage Auction. The highest price paid and the most paid for any of Elias's covers was $102,000 for the singular 9.6 in that November 2021 Heritage Auction. There are 103 graded copies of Chamber of Chills magazine number 23 with its Kiss of Death cover. There are only 2 copies in the highest 9.2 grade. A 4.5 just sold in an October 2nd fixed price eBay sale for $6,550. The highest sale was on July 31st when a 9.0 went for a slashed $40,000. L.B. Cole was one of the great cover artists of the Golden Age, working across genres and publishers to produce some of the boldest comic covers of the era, most notably on Mask Comics. So it's no surprise that he has some amazing pre-code horror covers as part of his body of work. Suspense Comics number 8, published by Continental Publications in 1945, is a fine example of Cole's use of the spider motif to denote terror. There are 69 graded copies, few of which sell each year. A 4.5 sold in a May 27th fixed price eBay sale for $8,429. The record setter was a 9.2 Promise Collection copy, selling in the September 2021 Heritage Auction for $60,000. Another spider cover by Cole was Startling Terror Tales number 11, published in 1952. Creepier than the cover for Suspense Comics number 8, holders of this book in the higher grades rarely sell. In fact, only 1 copy above 7.0 has sold since 2013. That copy was an 8.5 going for $19,200 in the November 2021 Heritage Auction. Of the 111 graded copies in the CGC census, 2 are in the 9.2 grade and 1 in the 9.0 grade. None of these have ever sold. Most comic collectors know Bill Everett as the creator of Namor the Submariner for Funnies Incorporated and published by Timely Comics in their first publication, Marvel Comics number 1. Everett was one of the few Marvel mainstay artists who, after serving in World War II, would continue providing work as superheroes faded and Timely became Atlas. Everett was also the co-creator, along with Stan Lee, of a character by the name of Daredevil. Everett also co-created with Lee a character named Zombie, who graced the cover of Menace number 5, published in 1953. There are 68 graded copies of Menace number 5, none of which is sold in 2023. The highest price paid was $15,600 for one of only 2 top graded 8.5 copies in a January 2021 Heritage Auction. One of Everett's best pieces of art during the pre-code horror era graced the cover of Mystic 18. Humorous yet terrifying, it exemplifies the artist's output at the time. There are only 44 graded copies, none above the 8.5 grade. A 7.5 sold in the August 25th Comic Connect auction for $5,290, which is the highest price paid for a copy. The singular top 8.5 graded copy has never sold, and the lone 8.0 graded copy last sold in 2006 for a mere $203. Finally, there's the timeless Venus number 19, easily Everett's best known work outside of his creation of Submariner. The woman's look of absolute horror as her dancing partner is revealed to be a skeleton is as realistic as you'll see on the cover of a pre-code horror comic. There are only 67 graded copies, none above 9.0, and only single copies in each of the grades above 6.0. The most recent sale, and only sale this year, was the singular 8.5 graded copy, going for $76,000 in the March 18th Comic Connect auction. That also marks the record high price paid for this comic, as the 9.0 has never sold. Perhaps no other artist had as great of an impact on Golden Age superhero and pre-code horror comics than Bernard Bailey. Co-creator of both Sandman and Hourman for DC, Bailey also drew some of the most terrifically terrifying comic covers ever seen. He also founded Bernard Bailey Studio with Mark Raboy, where a number of artists got their start, including Frank Frazetta, Gil Kane, and Carmine Infantino. Eye injuries are a favorite of pre-code horror collectors, and none are as horrific as the cover of Mr. Mystery number 12, published by Aragon Publications in 1953. So visceral is the cover, you can almost feel the heat of the poker as it nears the horrified man's eye. There are 76 graded copies, but none above the grade of 8.0. The latest sale was a 6.0 going for $14,376 in the August 25th Comic Connect auction. The highest price paid was $36,000 for an 8.0 from the personal collection of Nicolas Cage, one of only 5 copies in the top grade. Mr. Mystery number 11 and Mr. Mystery number 18 are also worth checking out for their gruesome Bailey covers. What's not to love about the cover for Weird Mysteries number 5, published by Gilmore Magazines in 1953? If you're a fan of exposed brain matter, this one's for you. There are 77 graded copies, but again, none above 8.0. The most recent sale occurred in the September 17th Heritage Auction when a 4.0 went for $14,000. The highest price paid was $22,800 for a Northford Pedigree 5.5 from the collection of Nicolas Cage in a September 2022 Heritage Auction. The lone 8.0 graded copy sold in a 2015 Heritage Auction for $17,925. It's hard to imagine it's going for less than $30,000 now. Weird Mystery number 4 also sports a Bailey cover worth your perusal. Making his mark for the publisher Charlton, Lou Morales was a popular artist on the title The Thing. Morales' work was also frequently seen in a number of Atlas horror titles. Keeping with the eye injury theme, the cover for The Thing number 7 just looks absolutely painful. You can almost feel the agony as the demon gouges out the poor man's eyes. There are only 43 graded copies, although there is one in the top grade of 9.2. Only 3 copies have sold this year, with the top sale being a 5.0 going for $1,080 in the March 21st Heritage Auction. The top overall sale was an 8.5 that went for $3,600 back in 2019. It's been 14 years since one of the 9.0 graded copies last sold in 2009 for $2,091. The lone 9.2 copy has never sold. In fact, no copy above 7.0 has sold since 2020, making it difficult to ascertain true present values for the higher grades. It will be very interesting to see the final price if one goes up for sale in the near future. The cover for Lawbreaker's Suspense Stories number 11 and its overall theme is disgusting enough that it's been granted its own nickname by pre-code horror collectors, the Tongue Bouquet. This marks Morales as one of the creepier artists of his time. There are 76 graded copies and an 8.0 just sold for the first time in the September 17th Heritage Auction for the price of $7,800. The highest price paid was $19,000 for a Bethlehem Pedigree 8.5 in the January 2022 Heritage Auction. The lone 9.0 has never sold. So as a bonus, I'm throwing in my favorite artist of the era, Johnny Craig. Among the fine stable of EC artists, none has caught the eye of pre-code horror collectors more than Craig. Some of the best and well-known horror covers of the era are from Craig's pen. His realistic draftsmanship set him apart from other horror artists and matches well with his moody and cerebral stories. Just take a look at his most famous pre-code horror cover, Crime SuspenStories number 22. It's not just the horrific subject matter that draws the eye, but the framing of the scene as well. No wonder it was used as one of the star witnesses for the prosecution in the 1954 Senate hearings on juvenile delinquency. There are 413 graded copies, a high number and a proof of its extreme popularity. The lone 9.8 and 9.6 copies have never sold, but a 9.4 William Gaines file copy sold earlier this year in the March 16th Comic Connect auction for a staggering $90,112. Just imagine the heights it could reach if the 9.8 or 9.6 were offered at an auction. Another of Craig's masterpieces is the cover of Crime SuspenStories number 20. The eye is definitely drawn to this cover, yet wants to look away as it's almost too real, making it all the more frightening. While not quite at the level of fame of Crime SuspenStories number 22, there are still 278 graded copies. There have been 9 sales this year, with the top sale being a 6.5 going for $2,900 in a July 24th eBay auction. The top price paid was for another 9.6 graded William Gaines file copy that sold for $31,200 in an April 2022 Heritage auction. It is one of the only 2 copies in the top grade. Another Craig cover, Vault of Horror number 30, features a stump of an arm hanging there in a subway car as onlookers look horrified. There are 114 graded copies. It's definitely not one of the top Craig covers for collectors. Prices are more reasonable as well, with the grade as high as 5.5, going for as little as $708 in the March 22nd Hakes auction. The top price paid was $7,800 for one of the top 2 graded 9.6 copies in a February 2019 Heritage auction, much lower than it would likely sell for in a present-day auction. What's your favorite pre-code horror comic cover? Let us know in the comments below. Okay, that does it for this week. Once again, check out the blog, linked down in the description below. Be sure to check out our price guides for comics, video games, concert posters, magazines, and now a preview for Magic the Gathering trading cards. Thanks so much for tuning in for another week in spec. Don't forget to like and subscribe so that you never miss a video. See you next week.